reason that I believe that I'm more optimistic about Shedeur than a lot of people are, or a lot of you guys are, is because I'm not naive to the fact that the whole what happened with him and Kevin with the whole no training camp thing or not getting the reps and having to learn things on the fly. See, y'all look at it as a guy who statistically he didn't put up the statistics that you want. I looked at it as when I saw him in Baltimore and I saw them do what they did to him in Baltimore, I saw a guy who, even in that, as bad as he looked, still had a chance to win that game. You know, if Gage Larvin catches that ball, we singing a different tune.
Shedeur Sanders hasn't thrown a regular season pass for the Browns yet, but somehow he's already become one of the most talked about quarterbacks in football. Every practice gets analyzed, every report becomes a headline, every opinion creates another debate. Some national analysts continue questioning whether Shedeur is even ready for the NFL. But one former NFL player believes the critics are missing what is happening right in front of them. And after hearing Tyvis Powell's response, the conversation around Shedeur suddenly became a lot more interesting.
It is a competition. There's only 100%. One guy that's going to play. They're not going to do a 2-quarterback offense in Cleveland. One guy plays, one guy wins the job. And I said yesterday that I think that Shedeur Sanders fell behind early, and my own speculation is that Todd Monken had a heart-to-heart with him about what he needs to do. And he's doing it, and he's gaining ground. And he's got a chance now. It looked early on like it was going to be Watson. I think Shedeur has a chance now.
What makes this story different isn't that people are criticizing Shedeur Sanders. That has been happening since draft night. The real question is why so many critics seem convinced they already know what he can or cannot become before he has even received a real opportunity. Tyvis Powell looked at the situation from a player's perspective, and instead of attacking Shedeur, he asked a much simpler question. Why isn't the Browns coaching staff giving him a fair chance to prove himself with the first-team offense? That single question has fueled an entirely new debate around Cleveland's quarterback competition.
Would you have rather this thing been solved already, or are you okay with the competition still running its course?
I mean, ideally, you would love to have it been solved by now. I mean, but that would mean that one guy's just completely blowing the other guy away. Like, it's not even close, you know, and they would have been able to make that decision. But the fact that it's still going on, you know, to me, I feel like it shows that it's two guys that's putting their best foot forward. There's something there from both guys, you know, and I think at some point you do got to make that decision.
Tyvis Powell didn't argue that Shedeur should automatically be named the starter. He argued something much more reasonable. If a young quarterback continues making plays in practice, earns praise from teammates, and keeps showing improvement every day, shouldn't he at least get a chance to work with the starting offense? Powell admitted he understood why veterans like Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett would receive opportunities. He also understood why the Browns wanted to evaluate Dillon Gabriel after drafting him earlier. What he couldn't understand was why Shedeur wasn't getting any meaningful reps with the first team despite consistently generating positive reports from practice. That is where this story starts becoming bigger than one quarterback. It becomes a conversation about opportunity. NFL coaches constantly say every player has to earn his chance. Powell believes Shedeur has been doing exactly that. So, naturally, he wants to see whether those strong practice performances translate when surrounded by the team's best players. Meanwhile, the national conversation has continued moving in the opposite direction. Some analysts remain skeptical because of Shedeur's slide in the NFL draft. Others point to concerns that surfaced before the draft process. Still others believe Cleveland already has enough quarterbacks ahead of him on the depth chart. All of those arguments have one thing in common. They are based largely on projection instead of what is happening during Browns practices. That is exactly what Tyvis Powell seems to be pushing back against. He isn't asking people to ignore Shedeur's weaknesses. Every rookie has weaknesses. What he is asking is whether the evaluation should be based on old opinions or current performance. If a player continues improving every single day, shouldn't that matter more than pre-draft narratives? That is the question many Browns fans are now asking as training camp approaches.
Because I think we both agree that Shedeur Sanders has closed the gap on Deshaun Watson. I think it's telling that Todd Monken didn't name a QB1 coming out of minicamp. I think that tells you that Shedeur has closed the gap. I think there were people that were there watching practices for the first time in minicamp that weren't watching in OTAs, and they came away more impressed with Shedeur Sanders.
The timing also makes this debate impossible to ignore. Cleveland doesn't have an established long-term answer at quarterback. Joe Flacco brings experience, but everyone understands he isn't the future. Kenny Pickett is trying to revive his career. Dillon Gabriel is another rookie learning a brand new offense. Shedeur Sanders is fighting to prove he belongs in that same conversation. No matter which quarterback eventually wins the job, the Browns need to know exactly what each player can do before making a long-term decision. That is why Tyvis Powell believes every meaningful rep matters. You cannot fully evaluate a quarterback if he never gets the opportunity to play with the starting offensive line, the starting receivers, and the players he'll eventually depend on if his number is called. Whether you agree with Powell or not, his argument is difficult to dismiss because it focuses on competition rather than hype. He isn't asking the Browns to hand Shedeur the starting job. He is asking them to let the competition be as complete and as fair as possible. And that may be the biggest reason this story keeps growing. It isn't really about proving the critics wrong. It is about making sure the Browns don't accidentally overlook a young quarterback before discovering what he is truly capable of. That is a question no franchise can afford to answer too late. Tyvis Powell's biggest point isn't really about Shedeur Sanders. It is about competition. Every NFL coach says the best players will earn their opportunities. Every offseason we hear that jobs are open and every rep matters. Powell simply wants those words to match reality. If one quarterback continues stacking good practices, he believes those performances should eventually lead to better opportunities. Otherwise, what is the point of calling it an open competition? That is why Browns fans have become so invested in every practice report, every completion, every deep throw. Every positive review from teammates creates another round of discussion. Nobody is saying Shedeur has already proven himself, but many Browns fans agree with Powell that development only happens when players are challenged against the best competition. If the Browns truly want to know what they have, sooner or later they have to let him work with the first-team offense.
Yeah, and Ashley, again, it's not a huge surprise that there is no starter name. That's where this had been going for a little while now. We thought maybe a couple weeks ago it could end up being Deshaun Watson, but Shedeur Sanders certainly has closed that gap. So I hope you're ready for another training camp quarterback battle.
This is also where the national conversation becomes complicated. Analysts like Mike Florio and Warren Sharp have questioned different aspects of Shedeur's outlook, while others around the league believe it is still far too early to make any final judgment. That is the problem with evaluating rookie quarterbacks before preseason games even begin. Every opinion is based on limited information. Tyvis Powell believes the only thing that should matter is what happens inside the building. Coaches watch every throw. They know who understands the playbook. They know who responds after making mistakes. They know who improves from one practice to the next. Fans and national media only see a small part of that process. The coaching staff sees everything. That is why Powell believes patience is just as important as criticism. At the same time, he understands that patience cannot become an excuse to avoid giving young players meaningful opportunities. Every franchise eventually has to find out whether a rookie quarterback belongs. That process starts with trust. It starts with reps, and eventually it has to happen against better competition. The Browns aren't simply looking for someone who can survive the season. They are searching for a long-term answer at the most important position in sports. If Shedeur develops into that player, every extra rep today becomes valuable experience tomorrow. If he doesn't, at least the organization will know it gave him every opportunity to prove himself. That is why preseason football suddenly feels much bigger than usual. Every series will be analyzed, every throw will be replayed, every mistake will become a headline. That pressure comes with being Shedeur Sanders. Long before he entered the NFL, people had strong opinions about him. Some believed he would become a franchise quarterback. Others believed he was overrated. Now comes the only part that truly matters: the games themselves. Tyvis Powell isn't asking anyone to crown Shedeur before he earns it. He is asking people to stop deciding his future before he has the chance to write it. That is a very different argument, and honestly, it is one that many former players seem to understand because they know how quickly careers can change once real football begins.
See, I think the way how y'all look at things is different than how we look at things. We look at coming to practice every day being the best player we can be as an individual and as a good teammate. Y'all look at it as like a competition. It's like that's not really nothing I'm just focused on. I'm focused on developing as a player, like doing everything, getting as comfortable as I can in the offense and the scheme, and playing with that confidence I had.
So where does this leave the Browns? It leaves them with one of the most fascinating quarterback battles in the NFL. Veterans are fighting to hold their jobs. Young quarterbacks are trying to create opportunities. Coaches are searching for consistency. Fans are searching for hope. And the national media continues debating every step along the way. Maybe Mike Florio and Warren Sharp will ultimately be right about Shedeur Sanders. Maybe Tyvis Powell will be right instead. Right now, nobody knows. That is exactly why training camp and preseason exist. They are designed to separate opinions from performance. One thing is already clear, though. Shedeur Sanders has become one of the biggest stories in Cleveland before playing a meaningful snap. Every practice attracts attention, every update creates another debate, and every opportunity becomes more important than the last. Tyvis Powell believes the Browns should let the competition play out without preconceived opinions getting in the way. If Shedeur earns bigger opportunities, give them to him. If another quarterback clearly outplays him, that player should win the job. It really is that simple. In the end, football has a way of settling every argument. Rankings fade away. Predictions are forgotten. Hot takes disappear. Performance remains. The Browns don't need social media to tell them who their quarterback should be. They need the player who gives them the best chance to win. If Shedeur Sanders proves he is that player, every early criticism will become background noise. If he doesn't, the Browns will move forward knowing they made the right evaluation. Either way, the answer won't come from a headline. It will come from the field.